of D, E, and F, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. We will now start with item D. Consider authorizing the city manager to reject all bids received for RFP FIN-01-19 audit services and comprehensive annual financial report. Tina?
Mayor, item
Yes.
D and E sort of go together, so
Okay, well,
can
let me read it as well.
E as well in that one.
Consider authorizing the city manager to execute an amendment to the existing professional services agreement with Armstrong, Backus and Company, LLC, for the comprehensive annual audit of the city's financials and other audit services. Now you're on.
Yes. Good morning, Mayor, City Council members, and Mr. Valenzuela.
Good morning, Tina.
Good morning.
Tina, I just need you to help me understand. On item D, when we put this out for proposals, Armstrong and Backus did not submit a proposal as I looked at the background information. It was mailed to them, but they did not submit a proposal. So 3 other companies submitted a proposal. So it looks like item D is rejecting those 3 and going back and approaching Armstrong Backus to submit a bid, or help me understand
Yes,
what
ma'am.
that's about.
An email was sent to Armstrong, Backus and Company. Unfortunately, it was sent to the partner who was in charge of the audit in the previous 5-year contract period. And so it was an oversight on their part that they did not receive the request for the proposal. And so in reviewing the 3 proposals that were submitted, while they all did have very qualified firms that submitted, they did not present a best value for the city. And so we are requesting to reject those proposals and to go back and to extend the contract with Armstrong, Backus and Company. And this was approved and recommended by our audit committee as well.
Okay. Well, I just wanted, as I was looking at that and saw that they hadn't initially bid, it made me wonder why. So
Yes, ma'am,
I
of
just,
course.
Okay.
That's
all right.
understandable.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So
And
would
you want to make a motion
Yes.
to approve item D and E?
item D and E
Okay,
is
do
my
I-
motion, yes.
And a second from Harry. Any public comment on item D and E?
Very good question, very good point. I wonder, how long has it been since new eyes have seen our audit?
It was a 5-year contract before, as Tina said, and so this was,
This was the second of 2 5-year contracts, so they've been reviewing our annual financial statements for 10 years.
thank you.
Just for clarification,
Harry, would you like to speak?
thank you. Just for clarification, it's a 3-year contract with extension, 2 1-year extensions on it. So it turns out to be a 5-year contract if the company's doing what they need to be doing. But it is a 3-year with 2 1-year extensions.
Harry, do you think that it's unusual that fresh eyes have not seen our accounts? I mean, isn't it kind of a general policy that every 5 years we get new eyes in on the these things like this?
The idea that you look at it to make sure that I actually happen to sit on the audit committee, so I was part of this particular process, but have also been part of the process throughout the whole year. For the last 3 years, I've been a part of the process before the audit was done by having conversations with the auditors from Armstrong Backus to let them know, from the concern of the citizens as well as council, exactly what I would like them to look at, to concentrate on. So from my perspective, the CAFR that we've looked at just a few weeks ago, a few council meetings ago, certainly was vetted very well, and I think they do a great job.
Well, I have no doubt that they do, but it's just general policy that you get fresh eyes. It doesn't,
And what policy is that?
that you get new eyes to see about every 5 years is what I've understood in the past.
Can I speak to that?
Yes, you may.
As I mentioned earlier, there are new eyes on our financial statements because the partner in charge has changed over the course of those 10 years, as well as the additional staff members that come out to do the field work.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I could.
Yes, Michael.
Steve, what you're saying does make sense when you have the same personnel per year. So that principle, we don't have a policy, nor is it a requirement at this point for cities in Texas that we change periodically. But the principle does apply. that you want to be careful about having the same eyes doing the same piece of work every year. And as Tina mentioned, the personnel assigned to the work has changed, and we do watch that. And as Harry
Still
said, they will
in-house.
place special emphasis on different areas to maintain that fresh perspective. If it stretches longer, it's something we can talk about, but
I think you should go to new people, and these, they may have raised their bid because they know that you need a one-time job to come in and look at things, and so, and even the Backus, Armstrong and Backus may have thought that they weren't eligible to give another proposal. But I think new eyes need to be seen, seeing these accounts, and everything that we've talked about is kind of in-house, and we kind of need somebody outside just to reassure the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Any further public comment? With no further public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor of approving item D and item E, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, it passes 6-0. We will now move on to item F, which is consider authorizing city staff to apply for a HUD grant to fund a rapid rehousing for homeless program through the Texas Homeless Network in the amount of $150,000 and authorizing the city manager to execute all related documents. Bob?
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. I just have a quick question. I know some of the grants that we apply for require a city match, and I was wondering, with this grant proposal, would it require any match from city funds?
It does require a 25% match, but it can be in kind. And we've talked with the Public Housing Authority. They have a rapid rehousing voucher program. If you recall, about 2 years ago, we initiated a pilot program very similar to this. Now we're going, and it was very successful.
Tell us about it.
Sorry?
Tell us about that program.
It was basically, we provided vouchers for homeless individuals. The city, through some additional funds, we would get them off the street, get them into a hotel, and then the Public Housing Authority would find them permanent housing. That's the rapid rehousing model. We're going to extrapolate that and expand that into a bigger program to cover more individuals. And the Public Housing Authority voucher can be in-kind match. And that's what we're hoping for. We're not going to use cash as the match. So I think it'll work. We're very comfortable with that. And it is a coalition program. We have several of our members are going to sign MOUs to be part of this rapid rehousing program. So we're pretty excited about it.
Okay. So when you apply for it, you will make it clear that you're looking at in-kind matches? Am I understanding that?
Absolutely.
What would that in-kind be?
In kind of the vouchers from the Public Housing Authority. In fact, we did a preliminary review, and it seems that we're going to have plenty of match, like $107,000, and all we need is $42,000 match. So we're going to be in good shape.
All right. All right. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate that. Mayor, I make a motion to approve this item F.
All right, is there a second? Tommy seconds it. Any public comment?
I had questions on, how many people are we looking to deal with, to handle? Is this for the whole year? Is it for just a few people, or how does this, what are the numbers involved?
We don't have exact numbers, of course. Our last homeless count was 268, so you can see the numbers. It may seem small, but 268 individuals around San Angelo makes an impact, a visual impact, unfortunately. So we're $150,000. We're going to shoot for about 100 individuals because not all homeless individuals want to participate, and so that's going to be a problem. But there's plenty that do want to participate, and we're going to try to target those. So we're thinking about 100 people. That's just a general number. There's no specifics at this point.
Do we know anything about Salvation Army at this point?
They still plan on opening up next month, I believe. There's a representative here if you want to have additional questions. I'm sure she can address
We
it.
do that. I'd like to hear, I think it would be an important information for us to have.
Morning.
Good morning. If you'll state your name, please.
Janet Sheen.
Okay.
At this moment, we are still waiting on funds to come through. We do not have a specific open date as of yet because we are relying on the funds to open up. So
The intention is to reopen.
the intention is to reopen, but we don't want to end up in the same position, lacking the funds. It takes about $500,000 a year, $500,000 to run the shelter. So without those funds, we don't want to open up having just a little bit and end up having to close it back down again. But we do have two $200,000 grants pending. We're just waiting on the answer.
Thank you
Okay.
for that update.
All right, thank
Any
you.
further public comment? With no further public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With any noes, passes 6-0. We will move into our regular agenda, and we will start with item A, which is the first reading and public hearing of an ordinance to modify the Code of Ordinances to remove the policy for Lake Nasworthy lot leases, sell or lease lots, and the lease of city-owned property through recreational leases, and to require such policy to be adopted by resolution. Teresa?
Thank you, Mayor. This is one of these cleanup items that we're doing in the Code of Ordinances. Our code is filled with things that are generally held as policies, including this real estate policy. What it does, it essentially sets the parameters for leases and sales of lake property. As part of the cleanup, we're removing those things from our code. One, to make our code simpler for people to understand, but two, also, I think it's $18 a page that our code provider charges us every time we change something in the code. So in order to save some city funds, we believe that it's a better policy to put these things into policies. We will be bringing a policy back after second reading that's going to be proposing some updates to the numbers. We're going to be providing information to the property owners who will be affected by that so that they are aware of the proposals that we're going to be making. And you'll have an opportunity to adopt that policy separate from this ordinance. But all this ordinance does is removes that policy from the code.
Okay, so there's no statistics, no numbers, no anything attached to this.
Not to this one. This is purely code cleanup. When we
Okay.
bring the policy back, we will have some numbers for you on the new policy.
Okay, with that, do I have questions from council? With no questions from council, do I have a motion? Tommy moves to approve. Is there a second? And a second by Tom. Public comment, please.
Steve Hampton. I had a question. According to my legal dictionary, a resolution is temporary and an ordinance is permanent. Sales are permanent, I understand. So
We're not completing sales through a resolution. We're completing sales through a sales contract. All we're doing with the resolution is adopting a policy. It's very common practice for us to do it that way when we want council to set direction. The difference, in addition to being part of the Code of Ordinances, is it takes 2 readings to change something. There's new state provision out there that everything's going to still require a public hearing, so the public is still going to be able to speak on a resolution, but it really is just a simpler process.
it would come through here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any further public comment? With no further public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor of regular agenda item A, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Motion passes 6-0. Item B is a public hearing, discussion, and deliberation on requested projects to be considered for funding with grant year 2019 Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, and Home Investment Partnerships Home Grant Funds from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And we have Bob Solis back with us.
Good morning again. We're here to get direction on our recommended allocation for the federal grant funds for the 2019 grant year. We did ensure that the recommended projects meet our 5-year strategic plan. And while we had a slight bump in funding last year, this year we took a pretty good hit, over $48,000 in CDBG and over $43,000 in home grants. This is the funding trend. You can see, unfortunately, it's been going down steadily over the years. With the exception of last year's bump, we still have a downward trend, unfortunately, which of course affects our projects and programs.
Mayor, I
Yes,
have a question.
Billy.
Bob, what do we attribute that downward trend to? You probably have said this before and I just don't remember, but
It's federal funding. It's the a lot of times we're slaves to the federal decisions. A lot of times we have no control over that. So it's
Right.
basically the allocation from the HUD, the president's budget affects it quite a bit. We do have we're hoping to we may get a little bump later on in the year. I know they're still talking about that, but that's the numbers as we speak now. So we
it
don't
comes
we don't
from the
control
top,
that.
just cutting.
That's the
social
trend. It
programs.
has been. Yeah. In fact, one time CDBG and home grants were on the table for elimination. That was back during the Obama administration. The Trump administration did the same thing, but it's so far it hasn't happened. We're hoping it continues.
But
We
These
do have a
dollars
lobbyist.
are for the fiscal year, not the calendar year.
This is fiscal year. Yes,
So
ma'am.
fiscal year ending September 30th.
Yes, ma'am. So October the 1st starts this year. This
So
is
what you're
this is-
presenting today is what would start October 1.
Yes, ma'am. October the 1st. We're a little bit behind because of the way the HUD categorizes the grant. It is the program year 19, although it's fiscal year 20. That's how they do it.
Okay, just so we're aware.
It's a
You
little
might
different.
also talk about, you had a 5-year plan, and this fits in with your strategic 5-year plan. Do you have some bullet points on what that 5-year plan is, strategy-wise?
We're actually, we had council approve it 5 years ago. We have another one coming up. We start our next 5-year plan next year. So you'll see the comprehensive plan next time you see me next year.
But
so-
some highlights of that are what?
The
And
highlights
how does this
are,
tie into it?
it's basically, we're going to deal with a lot of the issues we talk about. We're going to deal with, for example, we're going to deal with the cost burden that individuals are experiencing through some of our programs. We're going to address homelessness, those kind of things. So no specific. I wish I brought it with me, but I didn't, unfortunately. But most of our programs do meet our 5-year plan. And again, we're trying to ensure that special needs are addressed, those kind of things.
Okay.
Without specifics, unfortunately, I'm sorry. Okay. And like I said, we do look at the housing trends here in San Angelo. Not surprisingly, we still have a cost burden, and the cost burden is basically people pay more than 30% of their income towards housing. And you can see the renters are affected more than homeowners at 42%, and 12% of those pay 50% of their income to housing, which of course affects the rest of your livability.
When you say owners is 21% versus renters 42%, does it 21%, is it inclusive of mortgage, insurance, property taxes, and utilities? Because renters don't have the property taxes and sometimes don't have utilities and don't have insurance. So is this comp numbers or simply rent as a line and a mortgage line for an owner?
I believe these are HUD numbers, of course. I believe they use the straight number. In other words, you pay X amount for rent, you pay X amount for your mortgage. Of course, your mortgage would include some of the other additional costs as well, I believe. So they would probably include, if you have a mortgage, you're paying insurance, for example. So that's the number they would use.
But you're not paying property tax.
But they're not paying, exactly
over and
right.
above that.
They're not paying property tax. And that might not be a part of the formula. So I don't know, unfortunately. So again, these are HUD numbers that we use every year. We still see more than 14% of the population in poverty.
Is
And
that ours or is that nationwide?
that is locally. Nationwide, we're a little bit below, actually, we're a little bit above the nation. We're a little bit better off than the state. So it's local. These are local
Meaning we
numbers.
have 14.5 or 15% below poverty?
We do. That's what it means. We also have agent of San Angelo, of course, America as well. 17% are Social Security eligible. 14% over 65, and of course we have an aging housing stock. And again, that's part of our strategic plan to address those things. And this is our recommendation. We're asking for $116,000 for admin, $112,000 for program delivery, $186,000 for Blitz rehab projects, $125,000 for our emergency repairs, and $141,000 for our debt service for Producers Park. And these numbers do include program income and funds from last year.
And does any of the emergency repairs go to, for example, things like the Bradford neighborhood homeowners or individuals who lived in the Bradford area?
Absolutely. In fact, we already used this year's emergency funds. We've had several clients come to us, and we've already helped with several units, so several projects. Although they are citywide, anyone that's eligible.
Sure.
And these are our home recommendations: $31,796 for home admin, $131,165 for first-time home buyers, and $85,000 for TBRA, which is tenant-based rental assistance for special needs through MHMR, and $120,000 for our CHODO set aside.
Could you
And
go
again-
back to this one slide? I just want to ask one more question. Sorry, on the previous slide. On the debt payment service, that is the debt we owe for the 108 program that we used for Producers Park?
That is correct. That's a Section 108 loan.
And what is the time frame on that? How many more years do we owe on that?
2025 it matures.
In 2025 it
Yes, ma'am.
matures? Okay. Thank you.
Well, actually, that's all I've got. If council is comfortable with these recommendations, we'll craft a annual action plan that comes to you next month, and then we'll send that off to HUD for their approval. So I'll
On the
take questions.
Galilea, I know that several of us have received comments on some of the houses, some houses that Galilea helped to build. Have we changed builders, or explain how we go out and select the builders for that?
CHODO. The CHODO is a special category. They apply to the city. They get vetted, and of course, council approves the CHODO. We only have one CHODO right now, and that is Galilee. At one time, Habitat was part of the CHODO. There's some requirements to go along with it.
Sure.
So we do. I know Galilee does have a pretty good developer. Bobby Brewer does a very good job. I'm sure there's some issues sometimes, but for the most part, we've had very good luck with their materials, their construction capability and abilities. We're very comfortable with them, actually.
Good.
We've been with them for a long time, and
Correct.
very successful.
Yeah, I agree. Do I have further questions from council? Yes, Tom?
Bob, tell me, on the first-time home buyers, how do we qualify them for that? I mean, how do we judge qualify and who won't?
Basically, they have to be income eligible. That's moderate income or below, based on a sliding scale, based on family size. But they have to be able to get a mortgage through one of our participating companies, banks, lenders. We have about a dozen of those who participate with us. And then basically, if they're squared away, and when it comes to closing, we come in with a check to help pay the down payment and closing costs.
So that is the down payment and
That's
the
the down
closing
payment
costs.
closing cost. The another program that we have it's not here because it's not home funds, but it's the Coastal DC Affordable Housing Program. That's gap financing, very similar, but they get brand new housing, and we pay the gap between the mortgage up to $60,000, and then the construction cost, usually about $40,000, and then we come in with that. That's a pretty successful program. We don't do many. We do about 6 a year. Based on the funds we get from Coastal DC.
Right. Thanks, Bob.
Further questions from council?
One.
Yes, Lane?
Bob, on average, how many first timers?
Sorry?
How many first timers do we have a year, on average, utilizing that?
We get, I wish I had another word. I wish Mario was here. She had to leave, unfortunately. I think we get about 15.
15 or 50?
I'm sorry, and I'm thinking, I'm sorry, I'm trying to
Because that
remember.
doesn't, if it's 50, that's not.
No. We do, well, we average about 10,000 to 15,000 or so for each down payment closing cost project. So we, if you just extrapolate that, you're going to talk about maybe what, I'm not a math guy, but I'm thinking maybe 30.
Well, 10 times 30 would be 300, right?
No, it would be 15.
1,000?
15,000.
15,000.
Per home,
Yeah, per home, per unit, yes.
so less than 10.
We get about
9 or 10.
I'm thinking 13. 13 comes to mind. 13 comes to mind. I'm sorry. I wish I could get back to you, sir.
It's in the ballpark.
It's in the ballpark. About 13 is what we normally do because it slides a little bit. Some
They're not
don't
all
require those.
15,000,
Exactly. Some
they may be
require
lower.
10,000. Some require 8,000. Some require the full 15,000. So that's
Well,
it's that
on
gap. So
average,
it's kind of
13.
changes a little bit. So 13 comes to mind.
Do I have further questions from council? With a motion and a second, do I have, oh no, I haven't taken a motion, sorry. Do I have a motion? I don't think I've asked for a motion, have I? Yes, so do I have a motion, Tom?
About so moved.
Okay, and with that, do we have public comment?
Steve Hampton. Again, my question is, how many people are we, how many lives are we touching with this money? You said you gave the one on the home, but the others, it breaks down pretty quickly. They don't get very much money, it seems to me. 25?
In November, I'll be here with a caper, which covers everything we've done and all the numbers we've affected for this past year. It changes every program. For example, emergencies, we've hit 76 individuals one year. We've gotten up to 100. Blitzes, we've done 47 houses. We've done, this year we did 26 homes. So it kind of varies a little bit, but we'll get a full report in November. I can tell you that, and unfortunately, and we do have it on last year's caper is on our website. If somebody wants to go and see what we did last year, it's pretty comparable to what we expect to do this year as well.
With less money?
With a little bit less money, yes. Well, that's what happened was you noticed because we have less money, one program went away. That's the homeless prevention program. We couldn't afford it, so that goes off. And that allows us to continue with our blitz. It allows us to continue with our emergency program, which are that's the core of what we do.
That Blitz program is fabulous.
It is.
Thank you. All right, do I have further public comment? Terry?
Terry
Good morning.
Jackson. I just wanted to say that what Bob does and what his programs do are fabulous. Helps a lot of people. The first-time home buyer program also. It allows people that aren't able to get everything together. They have good credit. They have everything except a down payment and or their closing costs. And this pays up to 12% for them, which usually covers all that. And it's a fabulous program for people that work really hard and just need a little help. So thank you for continuing it.
Because we just brought up that as it relates to people needing a down payment and closing costs, what happens if they default on the mortgage after we've paid for the down payment and the closing costs? It might not ever happen, just asking.
Yeah, the requirement is that they live in the house for 5 years. If that we can get our money back. We can sue to get the money back if we need to. But after 5 years, it is we sign off the lien. So if they default, we try to get some of our money back. It kind of depends on the process. Rarely do we get because we're secondary. We don't.
You're not
get,
the primary.
Exactly. Yeah, we rarely get. Once in a while we do get some funds, but usually we don't get whole. We never get whole.
Thank you. Any further public comment? With no further public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0. We will move into item C, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance approving PD 19-04, a rezoning from the general commercial, heavy commercial, CG/CH zoning district to planned development PD zoning district to allow for existing uses and uses permitted in the general commercial CG zoning district, an overall use plan, and an off-site sign comprising a total of 2.38 acres generally located at 1909 West Beauregard Avenue. John?
Thank you. John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. This is a planned development, Concho Collision, which is located on Beauregard. They've purchased all the properties you see here in blue, and this is just a planned development that incorporates all of that property that they now own into one planned development that basically allows what they're already doing. It does a couple of other things. One, they own this little triangle piece because that's technically on a separate piece of property. Normally, they couldn't put a sign there. And this, because it's part of the overall PD, it will allow them to place a nice monument sign in that triangle for their business.
Which means it'll be maintained, right? That triangle area?
Yes, part of their idea here is to improve all of the property, make it look nicer, including cleaning up that triangle. This is consistent, the request is consistent with the future land use plan of Neighborhood Center and with the existing underlying zoning.
So they bought those other buildings?
Yes. Yes, and so you can see a few pictures here of those others. There's their main facility, and then that's the building across the street. Again, it is designated commercial. It does fit with the commercial corridor of both Sherwood and Beauregard in that area, and it does consolidate the property and allows all of what they want to do. Staff does recommend approval, as did the Planning Commission unanimously. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do I have questions from council? None, I don't see any.
Owner on this, and I'm pretty excited about what he has potential for that triangle piece, beautifying that area, so I'm okay with this.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Move to approve by Ina, second by Harry. Was that Harry? Second. Do I have public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor of approving item C, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, motion passes 6-0. Item D, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance approving PD 19-05, a rezoning from the single-family residential RS1 district to the planned development PD zoning district to allow for uses permitted in the general commercial CG zoning district with the principal use of water, sports rental, retail sales, boat slips, and an office on the City of San Angelo special lease property located at 2138 Mary E. Lee Park Road, comprising 1.23 acres. John?
Thank you. This is another one of these where there's an existing lease on the property, on city-owned property, but all of the uses allowed by the lease aren't actually allowed by the zoning. And so this is cleaning up the zoning, adding a planned development that basically comports with the lease, allowing all of the uses that the lease allows. And so this really isn't adding much new, but it's accommodating what the lease already encompasses. A few pictures of the area. This is the 5-year plan, some of the expansion that they want to do on the property. Again, all of this is consistent with the existing lease.
Where's the water park?
Not aware of a water park,
Okay.
but if the applicant's here, they,
You know, the inflatables.
I think those would be in the water.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I just wondered
But
if it was
they're
around
not
that
shown on
area.
this graphic.
Yeah.
I won't read through all of these. The staff report does include all of the rationale for why this is recommended. Again, it is consistent with the existing lease. Staff does recommend approval. There are some conditions listed in the plan development. The Planning Commission also recommended unanimously. Those conditions are the following: accessory uses are allowed, and you can see the list there, mainly water and boat-related kinds of things. And And then some of our standard requirements, they have to submit a site plan prior to any future development to ensure that it meets all city codes. Again, I won't read through all of these, but you can see the plan development basically makes sure that the uses allowed on the property are consistent with what the lease allows as well. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Tom, do you? Tom?
I haven't heard anything from anyone pro or con, so I would move approval.
Any other questions from council? Then Lane will second Tommy's motion. With that, do we have public comment? Yes, please.
Good morning. This is
Good morning.
Josh and Gentry Sladen. We own Water Dog Rentals there, so we can answer any questions if we need to.
How excited are you?
We are very excited. Yes.
Good.
We love this. We love the lake. We live on the lake. It's basically our dream, and we're just looking to improve and add some things to make it.
My water park.
I was with John. I was like, water bar. What are you talking about?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Go get them.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you. With that, let's take a vote. All in favor of approving, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Motion passes 6-0. Item E is first reading and public hearing of an ordinance approving case SU 19-02, a special use to allow for a golf driving range, outdoor multi-use sports facilities, and related recreational activities, outdoor miniature golf, and outdoor events on 21.536 acres located at 2838 South College Hills Boulevard. And I have John back on again.
Thank you. This is another one of those city-owned property, a lease, either a completed lease or in the process and about to be completed. I'm not sure the status on that, but this is the Red Arroyo. The trail goes through there, College Hills Drive. And so this is the existing miniature golf facility is right there. So this would be an expansion of the use on that property. It's a little hard to see here, but there would be a couple of outdoor ball fields as well as potential for an indoor facility as well.
Did we work through the issue of, I see Shane nodding his head, because I think the last time we presented it, there was some concern about stormwater runoff area needed. And so we've worked through all of that. Shane, and you're very comfortable? He says yes, thumbs up. We go. Keep going.
And again, this is kind of at least a three-phase. There's the lease that you all approve. This is the zoning that basically just allows the uses on the property. And then any development on the property would require site planning that would include drainage studies, ensuring that they meet parking. And of course, in this area, it would include review by the floodplain folks as well. Here's a site plan of all, as I mentioned, what's proposed on the facility. Mainly outdoor recreation, but also some indoor as well as a retail in the existing building there, or a possible new building as well. Just some pictures of the area. You can see what's across the street, existing retail. There's the existing building and the existing golf range as well, and the parking lot. This is a use that is already in existence on the property, and again, as you know, you all have discussed the lease in the past.
Does it make sense to continue with the existing lease or to end the existing lease and start with a new lease with a longer term?
I would defer that question either to Cindy or
Come on down.
I saw her wanting to come forward. I could see it from here.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, Cindy Prees, Real Estate Manager. Council has already approved a new 20-year lease on that property. We are just waiting for the tenant to purchase the improvements, and the purchase of the improvements are contingent on the rezoning. So council has approved that new lease. We are just waiting for the tenant.
Great. Thank you for that update.
We did send out our notifications to the surrounding properties, one in favor and none in opposition. Staff does recommend approval, as did the Planning Commission, unanimously in this case also. There are some conditions of approval, including the transfer of the lease, which sounds like has already been done, review and approval by the floodplain administrator for any development in the floodplain, urban design review of any improvements on the property. We thought that was particularly important because this is city-owned property and it is on parkland adjacent to the trail that's heavily used. Any major changes to the plan would require approval coming back to you all. Minor changes could be approved by staff. And then because of the park and the adjacent residences, that any lighting be shielded so as not to create nuisances to the adjacent properties.
Before we move off that
Billy,
slide,
go ahead.
Mayor, I have a question. My first question, isn't this Lane Carter's area? You
Yeah, I
better
was
recheck
confused
that.
about that too. Uh-huh.
But,
Oh, did it?
Yeah, it says DeWitt, but I was sure it was Lanes. Yeah.
yeah. But I did have a question, Lane, if
But
that's
go
okay.
ahead, Billy, and then Lane can address you on it if it's bad.
On item number 2, where it talks about the floodplain manager approval for development in the floodway and floodplain, it seems like in some of the background information I was reading, it talked about some studies needing to be done, and I just wonder, who pays for those studies? Does the applicant pay for those studies, or is the city responsible for those studies?
My understanding is that falls to the applicant. That would be handled lease, but that's my understanding.
Lance is here to add comment on that.
Good morning. Yes, Lance Overstreet Engineering. Engineering does manage the floodplain, and that is a study that is required for the applicant or the developer to pay for on their own. It is what we call in the floodway, it's a no-rise study, which essentially means that anything that they are doing within that floodway will not change the water level in and or surrounding anything else to affect things. And so that is, and we have notified the developer as well as his representing engineer that would be required for the development, and we will have to have that approved. So,
Thank you.
A couple more conditions. One is we're also proposing to limit the hours of operation, again, because of the adjacency of residences and these outdoor ball fields. You can imagine the noise and the light from those at a certain hour. We wouldn't want this to be a 24 hours a day operation, and so they would have to shut down by 11:30.
I guess that's assuming everybody stays up till 11:30.
It's not, but that's the compromise of we want to shut it down at some point. We don't want to make it too early for people who may go to bed earlier. It could still create an issue, but that's pretty common or consistent. It also allows them the kind of activity that they want to have on the site. So it's a balance for sure.
Yes, Billy.
Are we consistent with those hours of operation throughout the city, or do we base our condition of approval depending on what it is and where it is? How do we do that?
We try to be consistent, and so we look often to our noise ordinance, for example, that has hours, although I think that goes to 10:30.
That's what I
And so
think.
we try to be consistent, and that's usually what we start with, are those hours. But then depending on a case by case, we sometimes look at different hours. Like in this case, we thought making that a little bit later would be appropriate in this particular case.
But we would still have the noise ordinance in effect at 10:30. So even though this is 11:30, you wouldn't get to extend the noise part of it to 11:30.
No
It'd
cheering
still
if they
be-
score a home run at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
You have to cheer in silence.
Well, that's Lane's problem.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
I got one more.
Yes, Tom, please.
What happens if we're having a tournament and we need to use these facilities and these fields, and it's one of those weekend tournaments that goes to 2, 3 in the morning? Can they actually bring in and ask for a variance for a specific time?
We could utilize our special events process to do that, and we can waive any of those requirements if we need to.
John?
And where's the water feature, John?
Wait till they get the drainage report, and then we'll tell you where that water feature
I
is.
think you could have gone out there on Sunday a couple of weeks ago, and you could
I
have
found
seen
a water
where the
feature.
water feature
Yeah.
was.
And that's all the conditions that we recommended. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Lane, do you have any questions or comments?
Just
I'm
in
excited
yeah.
about it, just because everyone keeps saying they want more and more things available for the youth and whatever. So I am thrilled that someone's taken ownership of this and had a great vision for what could be.
Same here. The only question I have is in regards to the noise. Our Bell Street complex, what are the hours of operation that we can have tournaments there? Because this parcel of land is actually more remote in relation to the nearest home than it is Bell Street. Bell Street just backs up right across the river from that, and the nearest home may be on Vista del Arroyo, past the swim and racket, and across Millbrook maybe. So what are our operations over there?
I'm not aware of any limitations over there. I may be wrong, but
Carl's coming forward.
Because we'll have tournaments go
Right.
a long time over there.
Usually for tournaments, it's very similar to this. It usually doesn't start quite that early and doesn't usually end quite that late, maybe about 7 to 11.
I'm just getting at, this is way more remote in relation to the nearest home. I don't have a problem with it, so I'll move to approve.
A move to approve from Lane. Do I have a second? A second from Tommy. And now we will open up conversation for the public. With no conversation, no comments from the public, we will ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, passes 6-0. We will move to item F, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance approving Z19-06, a rezoning from the single-family residential RS1 zoning district to the two-family residential RS2 zoning district on .2 acres located at 4014 Coliseum Drive. John?
thank you. This is a rezoning from RS1 to RS2 that would allow, instead of a single family, it would allow duplex. You can see the building here. It's a very long building, and in the past was used as a multifamily residence. We can verify at least 4 units and maybe more in the past, although that use ceased for more than 12 months. And so because it wasn't allowed by the underlying zoning, it's not allowed to continue as a multifamily. They're simply asking to convert it to a duplex to allow 2 units within that one building. It is, in the future land use plan, is neighborhood. You can see that most of the surrounding area is zoned RS1 for single family, although it's fairly close to this commercial area. And so that's part of the reason we were okay, because as you get over here, you can't really see it on this. It does transition to that commercial area, so it's kind of at the edge of this single family neighborhood. This is a couple pictures of the building. Again, it is a long building that has in the past been used for multiple family occupancy. This does meet all of the standards for duplex area. The multifamily use was discontinued, as I mentioned, but this was kind of a compromise between requiring them to go just to a single family residence for a building that has been used for multiples in the past, but trying to accommodate the concerns of the surrounding neighbors in not allowing this to go back to a 3, 4, 5 unit building. And so duplex is kind of that compromise that staff is supporting. We did send out our notifications, received 1 in favor and 1 in opposition. The opposition was largely along the lines of, this is all single family around it. It should stay single family and not be allowed multiple. Staff does recommend approval, as did the Planning Commission unanimously. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Would you like to make any comment?
You know, I went by and looked at it, and going to an RS2 to make it basically fit a duplex, fits what's there, and it goes away from it would probably keep 5 or 6 families out of it. So it's the best use for the property as presented. So I'm all in favor, and I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Elaine is seconding. Do we have a comment from the public on this item? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, motion passes 6-0. We will move into item G, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance approving Z19-07, a rezoning from the neighborhood commercial CN zoning district to the low-rise multifamily residential RM1 zoning district being .915 acres located at 5205 South Bryant Boulevard.
Thank you. This may look familiar. This is a property that was recently rezoned from multifamily residential to commercial. There was the owner had a potential commercial use for that property, and so came in for the commercial zoning. Now that use fell through, and so they're wanting to just go back to the multifamily residential. You can see that there is residential almost surrounding the property, and so that does make sense to be more residential. And I think what they would probably be looking at is something similar to what's there just to the south. This is neighborhood center, so from our perspective in the long-range plan, this could either go commercial or multifamily residential. Either one would be consistent. It is right there on Bryant, and so again, that makes it appropriate for either use. And so we're okay with the rezoning back to multifamily. Here you can see the property is just off to the right of this picture. You can see the homes that are back behind this property. The subject property is there and off to the left in that picture. Again, this is consistent with the surrounding. Staff recommended approval of the commercial zoning back a few months ago, but we're also supportive of the multifamily, either one. We did send out our notifications, did not receive any responses in favor or in opposition. And staff does recommend approval, and the Planning Commission also recommends approval unanimously.
Do we have a time frame that is in place from changing it from one zoning to the next zoning? Like, for example, well, you know why I'm asking. So if every 6 weeks someone wanted to ask to change the zoning, that is okay?
Normally, the requirement is if you're denied a zoning, then you have to wait, and I can't remember, it's either 6 months or 12 months, 6 months before you can come back. So you can't get denied and then keep asking every month for the same thing. But in terms of going back and forth like this, there's really no barrier to that. Now, they do have to pay the application fee, fill out an application, go through this process, so I don't think there's really a concern. This is the only one I can think of that in recent memory that has gone back and forth a couple of times, so I don't know that it's a problem, and there is the cost of going through the process, so I don't think people would be doing it unnecessarily.
Right, Tommy, do you have questions?
I do not. I have had no comments on this, and it is consistent with the area to go back to the multifamily, so I'd move approval.
Is there a second? Elaine seconds it. So is there any public comment on this item? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, motion passes 6-0. We'll move on to item H, which is the first reading and public hearing of an ordinance approving Z19-08, a rezoning from the Ranch and Estate R&E and General Commercial, Heavy Commercial, CG, CH zoning districts to the Heavy Commercial zoning district on 2.49 acres located at 5050 North Chadbourne Street. John?
Thank you. This is a rezoning, and you'll see a little bit on the next slide why it's important, but here you can see the property. This whole area you can see is in the plan for commercial, but when the Chadbourne corridor was zoned, it was basically some distance back. They just drew a line on each side of Chadbourne, and so you can see how it split a lot of properties. And so this subject property, most of it is in the heavy commercial zoning already. There's just this back little triangle that is part of the ranch and estate, and this rezoning is simply to clean that up, put in that little piece of ranch and estate into the property and rezone the whole thing heavy commercial.
So why are the pieces to the right of that not also part of that?
This is
Because
one.
that completes that triangle, but that doesn't complete the other.
It could.
to-
This is the property requested by the property owner. In some cases, on a case like this, we'll look at the surrounding properties and we may recommend changes to those. In this case, partly because some of those adjacent properties are already homes, if we were to ask them, they may actually want to go to ranch and estate instead of commercial. So we thought in this case, we wanted to just stick with the applicant's request and not look at a larger area. It is an existing business consistent with the CGCH or the heavy commercial zoning. This would allow them to expand to the back of their property onto that piece that's currently zoned ranch and estate, which they can't currently do. It is consistent with the plan, as I mentioned, and it would allow them to expand. We did send out our notifications. We received 2 in favor, 1 in opposition. The opposition was in your packet. It wasn't real clear to me from the letter exactly what their concern was. Staff does recommend approval, as did the Planning Commission unanimously. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do I have questions? Tom?
Same thing's a similar one. It's Keating, and it's a cleanup of the zoning and a plat. I've talked to 2 of the people that were concerned. Both of them, after explained to them, it was cleaning up the zone. And his expansion is actually going to put some conditions on him to actually lower the noise and everything a little bit. Not that the body shop has that much, but his hours of operation doesn't even bother me at all. So it looked very clean from our end. Nice job.
All right, then is that a
With that said, move to approve as presented.
And a second by Harry. Any public comment? Good morning.
Good morning. Erica Carter with Carter Fentress Engineering. I'm just here to answer any questions if y'all have any.
Any questions from council for Erica? With none, thank you for being here. We'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, motion passes 6-0. Item I, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance approving the abandonment and vacation of a 15-foot wide by 200-foot long, .0685 acres or 3,000 square feet public alley located south of West Beauregard Avenue, north of West Colorado Street, between South Tyler Street and South Polk Street. John?
Thank you. This is related to the rezoning we saw earlier for Concho Collision. This is part of that facility. As you may have noticed, they own all of these lots now, and they purchased a lot across the alley, and so they're wanting to abandon the alley so that they can incorporate all of their property on that side of the street into one lot without the alley intervening. It is, as I mentioned in the zoning case, it is consistent with our plan and the zoning for the area or surrounding area. Here's a look. You can see the alley right here on this picture. This is the Concho Collision facility. This is the property that they've recently purchased. And again, so that's the reason for abandoning the alley, is to be able to incorporate those properties across the alley all into one unified piece of property. As we look at abandonments, one of the things we look at is the use in the area. Is it used? So in this case, nobody uses that for access or for garages. There are utilities in the area, but we will require a utility easement. Well, either they move the utilities or they maintain an easement that allows for the access to those utilities moving forward. Not received any negative opposition to this. Again, we're recommending, as we normally do, that we don't close part of the alley. So Concho Collision is working with the other properties behind this to accommodate closing the entire alley, not just the half that affects them. Staff does recommend approval, as did the Planning Commission unanimously. And here's the summary of normal conditions. Again, they have 18 months to replat the properties altogether to basically allow the alley to be incorporated into the adjacent properties. And as I mentioned, maintaining an easement for those existing utilities that are within the existing current alley. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Lane, do you have any questions or comments?
Question, I'm good with this also. Move to approve.
And a second by Tommy. Any public comment on item I? No public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, motion passes 6-0. Item J, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance amending Chapter 12, Planning and Development, Exhibit C, Land Development and Subdivision Ordinance, Chapter 5, Procedural Requirements for Processing Subdivisions, Section 3, Stages of Development Review, Subpart C, Administrative Subdivisions, by including the review process. John?
Thank you. This is just a cleanup. Back a few months ago, actually about 8 months ago, I think, we brought you an ordinance change to the subdivision ordinance. In the process of submitting the documents in the council packet to you all, this particular section of the ordinance got inadvertently deleted. So you basically adopted the changes to the ordinance, effectively deleting this section. So this is basically just putting it back in. Since that section was amended, we couldn't bring it back for 6 months. And so now we've waited 6 months, and now we're bringing it back. As you read it, it is just a procedural thing. When you have to send an application in, how long we have to review it, whether it gets reviewed administratively or sent to the Planning Commission. So it's, and there's no substantive change to what we're currently doing. Again, it was just a section of the ordinance that accidentally got deleted that we need to add back in.
All right, do I have questions from council? Harry?
When we discover an error like this, and I know the only recourse is really to wait that 6 months, but if it's significant and it impacts a citizen or business, we ought to figure out a way that we could make this come back to the council to correct it. I don't know what that is, but I can tell you that we really need to make sure that we've got a process in place that allows that.
Julia?
You could bring it back earlier if absolutely necessary. Right now, the code says that we would wait 6 months, so we would need to revise the code in order to revise it. But if it was absolutely necessary, we could make that happen sooner than 6 months.
Well, in this case, 8 months went by, right?
Yeah, we waited the 6 months, and then by the time we got it all ready and for you all, it was an extra month or two. I think that's right. If it was something critical, it would be good to be able to bring it back sooner, especially in a case like this where it was just an inadvertent, it was just accidentally deleted.
Okay, any further move to approve by Harry? A second by Lane? Any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With no nays, passes 6-0. Item K, update and discussion of hotel occupancy tax performance and eligible capital improvement projects. Tina?
Yes, ma'am. This is an opportunity for the City Council to review the performance of the Hotel Occupancy Tax Fund year to date and to consider funding, possible funding source for some eligible capital project items that are in our capital improvement plan. So my first slide here is just kind of giving you an update on how the fund is performing this year. You can see here we're 67% through the fiscal year, but hotel occupancy tax is at 82% of what we budgeted for the fiscal year. Other is just the interest income that comes into that account, and then of course the expenditures that have gone out to our external partners as well as to our own internal other funds. Any questions on that slide? You can see year to date that revenue is over expenditure by almost $208,000 year to date.
Can you talk about fund balance?
Yes, ma'am, I have a slide for that. So the fiscal year 19 beginning fund balance was $1.35 million, less the 90-day reserve that we recommend leaving there in case of downturn in the hotel occupancy tax. It leaves $800,000 available for one-time funding needs. I will tell you also that, let me see what the amount is here. If we project revenue over expenditure flat for the remainder of the fiscal year, we do expect to add about $600,000 to that fund balance, but of course that's dependent on performance.
And the projects you're presenting today?
So right now, there are only 2 projects that are in our capital improvement plan, which allows us to consider them for funding. One would be roof replacements at Fort Concho, and the other would be improvements at the Bill Ayler Senior Memorial River Stage.
Okay. Carl, are you here to speak to those?
Yes, ma'am. How much detail would you like?
A lot.
Okay, on the Fort Concho roof replacement, and this is going back to replace virtually all the roofs. If we do all of them, we're looking at about $1,167,000.
How much?
$1,167,000.
Replace all of the Fort Concho roofs that need replaced.
That's correct. And that, we have a plan to do all of them except for Barracks 1 and 2, because those will, as part of the half-cent sales tax project to redo the visitor center, combined with that project, we could pull those out and do those separately with that project.
What's the time frame on that?
Probably looking at 2 or 3 years. And we could what work that does need to be done on those roofs could be patched with some of the insurance money we got from the claim to tie those over until we can completely redo them. So if we factor those out, look at what's available from the state office fund balance to apply towards re-roofing, about $100,000. The funds available in insurance from TML, Texas Municipal League, $125,000. There's a gap of $617,000.
Okay, and we have 1.167 million in needs.
Yes.
And we have 617,000 in funds. Now,
that's the gap. That's what we would need.
in the gap between the 1.167 and the 225 available. No, that doesn't add up.
So if you got the other, does he have the other 6 you've got in insurance and claims?
Six.
The other number that he is not mentioning is the $325,000 that you would decrease that original 1.167 million, and that is due to pulling out those 2 other roofs, I believe.
If you want me to go through the numbers again, I will.
Yeah, I think we should, just to be clear.
Can you, before
Start
you do that,
from-
can you prioritize do you have a prioritization of the ones that absolutely the most crucial and what those would total?
They are all pretty much in the stage where they do need to be replaced.
Okay.
There is a plan where we could do it in 2 phases.
My concern is, number one, that those roofs are in such horrible condition, and should we continue to get rain, we're in pretty bad situation. The storm issues, and then number 2, if I'm not mistaken, did one of the roofs get hit by lightning?
Yes.
In which, in the prioritization of roofs, where did that one fall?
That's part of the work that could be done as patching to tie us over to redo Barracks 1 and 2. So if I just go through the numbers right quick,
Okay.
the total cost in our estimate from one vendor, which when we put this out to bid, it could be lower than this, but this is from one qualified vendor, $1,167,000. If we factor out doing Barracks 1 and 2 roofs as part
That's
of this,
3 to 4 years down the road.
yes, but we could repair it and patch it to tie it over. We could subtract $325,000 from that. Add $100,000 to the project from the state office fund balance. Add $125,000 from TML insurance. Brings a shortage of $617,000.
Okay. Billy, please go ahead.
How many buildings are we talking about, Carl?
Bob has the correct number.
Bob.
Because that just seems really, really
A lot of buildings.
Good morning, Mayor, Council.
How many buildings do you have?
I have 22 total buildings, of which 17 or 18 are classified as cedar shake roofs and probably eventually need repair.
Is that what's making the cost higher, was the cedar?
That is correct, and we are beholden to that for several reasons. One, and most importantly, that's the way the buildings were built. And
Excuse me.
the local, state, and federal codes, if I do anything else, not that there really is an alternative, I risk losing those certifications, grants, status, so forth. To address the mayor's comment earlier regarding Barracks 1, we did take a lightning strike, one heck of a lightning strike. It hit the roof dormer, the air vent, not necessarily the roof. We are awaiting the TML insurance adjustment on that, and whether or not TML gives us any money for that, that roof vent and all the other roof vents are part of several projects that are being let out right now and should be finished by the end of the year, so that will be fixed. I think the other issues on the roofs are, we haven't necessarily prioritized them. We can, depending on the money that council is agreeable to, but another variable, not to make this more complicated, but it is that the TML money of $125,000 that Carl has referenced can only be assigned individually to certain buildings. It cannot be used as a pool. So if we pull out some of those buildings or prioritize them, we possibly would lose a small portion of that. That's why the $125,000 is a smaller figure than the original TML adjusted figure of $223,000, I think, because A, we've used some of that, and B, we're losing some of that because of prioritizing certain roofs.
You might mention the deadline for the TML.
And thanks to Tina, there's another issue of a deadline. Our risk manager has kindly prevailed upon TML to extend the deadline on this money to the end of the year. I sort of doubt we could get any further beyond that, so we're kind of in a situation where we need to make some decision and move ahead within the next month or so to bid this out or do whatever council pleases. The figure that Carl mentioned earlier, yes, is a single source figure. We are seeking and looking at other options, but there are few, as you well know, in Tom Green County, but that certainly doesn't preclude us from putting it out the bid and seeing what happens, and we might get lucky.
Lane, do you have a question?
The 22 buildings we have, what is the total square footage?
105,000 square feet of cedar shakes, approximate.
Happen to know in that bid what the, and I'm assuming cedar shake style roofing goes along the lines as normal composite, where they bid it out per square. Do you know what an average cost of the cedar shake runs?
The cost here is twofold. You're paying, of course, for the labor and the materials. We were advised by one contractor that the cost of the shingles, and we're using terms here interchangeably, has not gone up appreciably in the last 2 years, which is good, but the labor is the key component. But I would say, based on what I've seen on market rates, you're looking at an $8 to $9 per square foot total cost on the low end, and a $10 or $11 per square foot cost on the high end, labor being your key issue.
So they're bidding out the squares of just material when you say that, instead of some roofers where they'll say, for this type of composite roof, you're looking at a $15 a square foot.
No. The figures,
labor included.
No, sir. The figures that we are quoting you are total cost. That would include labor and materials.
That's the 10 to 11 at the high.
That's the 10 to 11. It could be 8 or 9 per square foot, or it could be higher depending on what kind of bids you receive. But just based on some jobs we have done, this is the figure we're dealing with. The biggest issue in a previous project we had with Officers Quarters 1, which of course was totally re-roofed with private money, was the cost of shingles, and you may recall there was a tariff issue with our neighbor to the north, which came and somewhat went, but that was another effect. But right now the price seems to be stable according to our consultant.
Do I have further questions? Harry? Oh, wait, and then I'll get you, Tommy.
I think just comment. First of all, this is the best restored fort west of the Mississippi. It is a prize for San Angelo. We need to keep this in mind as we make this investment, and it's truly an investment in this particular in the fort. So from my perspective, I think this is something that really needs to be done, and certainly if you've got excess hot funds, what better place to spend them? So from my perspective, I think we need to go forward with this.
Tommy?
Tina, help me out. I've heard the numbers, the 1.167 million, and then we've got a gap of 617,000. So, Carl, Bob, Tina, what 1.167 gets all your roofs?
You have sort of an option A and an option B. Let's start with the 1.167. That figure represents the re-roofing of all the roofs on the fort, actually not including the hospital, which was not declared as needing any fixing. It includes Barracks 1 and 2, the second and third largest buildings on the post. We are proposing as an option B that you deduct the cost of Barracks 1 and 2, which is approximately $320,000, give or take. Because eventually those buildings will be totally rehabbed.
The time frame on that, I keep.
It's a couple of years. We're in the midst of fundraising.
Does a couple of years mean 5 years down the road?
I can't answer that, Mayor, except that unfortunately raising money is an art and not a science, and if we can raise the money earlier, it'll be sooner. If not, it will be later. But what I'm trying to propose the council is a more palatable option, in that if you deduct the $300,000 plus and use the insurance money for strategic patching, you secure within reason those two roofs until the buildings are restored. There's also an issue that if you utterly and totally re-roof them now, a few years down the road, you're going to be chopping holes in them for HVAC installation and other restoration. So it's a yin and yang. If there were cuts to be made, that seemed to be the reasonable spot. So you take the 300,000+ off the 1.167 million, then you add in the available funding of the state office and the insurance eligible money. That brings you to the $600,000 figure.
That seems to me to be the best option, just as one member of the council.
You have a motion on that?
I'll make that motion.
A second by Harry. Any public comment? Diane?
Council,
Morning.
Diane Bays. I'm the Vice President of the Convention and Visitors Bureau. And I did have one comment and concern on this issue. While we appreciate everything that is available with the fort and what they do for our visitors, one of the law, part of the law of the hotel tax law is only 15% of the funds for hotel tax can be used for historic preservation. And so I did have that to address, and so I wanted to mention that because I don't know, even though that is reserved, that is something that needs to be determined about this.
There's any other further public comment? With no further public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor of approving the 617?
Does that change anything? The 15%, does that change anything in our motion?
No.
Mayor, if I may, I believe that if you can direct us to go back and probably have Bob and Carl go out for bids on this, and then that would come back to you for approval. Once we have final cost estimates, as well, we would need to bring back a budget amendment with that and a funding plan.
All right.
So I think what we need today is direction to do that and then to bring it back to you for final approval.
Exactly. The key there, Mayor, is that you're giving us direction today, but you're not authorizing the project today. That authorization will need to come with a budget authorization and approval of bids. And they'll need to jump.
With that review, we'll get with Teresa and make sure that we're using the funds appropriately.
Exactly.
All right, thank you. So we've concluded that conversation.
So I'll pull my motion and then direct staff to do such.
Okay. Thank you. Because I'll tell you later. Okay, next was the issue of the Bill Ayler River Stage.
As you know, council has been very gracious in giving us funds to go towards different improvements at the Foster Communications Coliseum and some improvements at the River Stage, which included new chairs and also some electrical connections to make it easier for soundboards to be connected.
The Civic Events Advisory Board has appointed a subcommittee to look at some additional improvements at the river stage. We don't have cost estimates on those, but again, we're looking for direction if council's interested in looking at doing some of these maintenance-related improvements at the river stage.
I think the river stage is one of the most incredible facilities that we have, and I think that people continue to look at it as a great venue. So I want to make sure that we support the improvements that we can afford to do to continue to make that river stage the great venue that it is.
Mayor?
Yes.
Rick gave me a list to read of possible renovation replacement items that they are talking about and considering. Renovate existing restrooms, renovate ticket box office, renovate concession stand, dressing rooms, replace old lighting, add netting under the river stage for bird issues, replace AC units, replace movable back wall, level entrance area for tour buses, repaving parking lot, adding concrete at both bottom gate entrances. He wanted to make sure you knew that they were thinking about these ideas, prioritizing these, and discussing them for future council consideration.
Is there prioritization on any of that?
No, they're working through that now, is my understanding.
Would it be appropriate for us to ask staff to come back with a prioritized list with cost estimates, and then we can go from there? Then I would make that request as well on this.
Okay. Any other direction or questions from City Council? With none, you have direction. Tina, now we're through with that one, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll move into item L, update on sales tax revenue performance.
For the month of June, we once again have good news. Sales tax was up 10.13%, and compared with June of the same month in the prior year. And we have hit the $1 million mark for being over budget for revenue at $1,041,000.
Terrific. We'll have some additional funds to put into street repairs.
Question for you, Tina.
Yes, Lane, do you have a question?
For those who pay quarterly, do we see a spike more than other months in January, April, July, and October? I know I pay my sales tax quarterly, and I don't know how many other businesses do.
Many play on a monthly basis?
Yeah, most pay on a monthly basis.
Okay. I didn't know if there was a known percentage of who pays quarterly and who pays monthly.
I don't know that offhand, but I could certainly bring that back next time I present.
I didn't know if that would play a factor on just those 4 months. It's just
It would be historic, so it would be the same thing every year? So
Right.
It wouldn't impact it one way or the other relative to how it's
not as
always
far as
booked?
increases.
So-
True.
And the only difference would be if there's a reason the way a month ends, if it would be on a Sunday or Saturday.
Would still
so-
play a fiscal year of a spike in those
That's
4
right.
months.
Exactly.
I'm just wondering that.
That's
I know
a good question, but
overall
I can
it's
definitely get information.
because you average it out, it's those 3 months paid in one. But just wondering if you could find that.
Any further questions for Tina today on that?
You have one more slide here, Mayor, just your sales tax by industry. As you recall, this lags a little behind because it takes time to get the information from the comptroller. But this is for the month of May of 2019 compared with May of 2018, and just showing you sales tax by industry.
Have we had any good statistics on the impact of Amazon?
No, but we do monitor those .com type sales tax remittances, and they have steadily increased over the years. We have been seeing those come in, though, probably since about 2015 or 2016. They steadily increase, so we do monitor that.
Okay. Further questions or comments from council? With that concludes our regular agenda. Today, we are going to move into closed session. The executive session on the provision of Government Code Title 5, Open Government Ethics, Subtitle A, Open Government, Chapter 551, Open Meetings, Subchapter D, exceptions to requirement that meetings be open under the following sections. A, Section 551.071, 2, consult with attorney when the governmental body seeks the advice of its attorney on a matter in which the duty of the attorney to the governmental body under the Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with this chapter regarding water rights and contracts for Lake Nasworthy. B, Section 551.074A1, to deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee regarding the annual evaluation of the city manager. Item C, Section 551.072, to deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if deliberation in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the position of the governmental body in negotiations with a third person regarding Friedman, Heinemann, S-327 and Windstone Park Edition. With that, we will take a break for closed session. It's 10 o'clock now. We'll be back by 11:15. Fast. We are going to call this meeting back to order at, give me a time, someone.
11:19.
At 11:19, 4 minutes late, so sorry for that. And with that, there are no announcements to be made from our closed session, so we will move on to 9B, which is announcements and consideration of future agenda items. Do we have any?
I do.
Harry?
We've got another group of homeless that are up underneath the overpass at 5th and Chadburn. And I've had several complaints from citizens over there about the citizens actually moving out from underneath the bridge to do their business closer to where the street is. So I've had conversation with the police chief, and he indicated that if the citizens would call dispatch, then he would get somebody out there. But I'd like to see if there's not something else that we can do and get ahead of the curve on this one and find a possible solution before we get into the situation like we had a couple of years ago. It's really, it's actually on both sides of the street, so technically it's on one side of the street belongs to Lucy and the other side of the street belongs to my district, but the bottom line is I'd like to try to find a solution for it.
All right, any other announcements or
Yeah, I've
future
got
agenda
one.
items? Yes, Tom?
I don't know if it was 1 or 2 meetings we had to go. John James was giving a presentation, and he drew on a map of a corridor of like when we route, I don't know whether it would be 14 or 27 through, and where it goes north of town.
Sure.
I'd love to see that on the map.
I-27.
Because a lot of people have thought that's 2105, and I said, actually, John drew that north of 2105, and they didn't believe me. So if we might had a map of the ETJ and where roads are going to go because of what he's anticipating with the census, I think that'll be great.
One of the issues with that is because there have been no defined routes that have been approved, and that's one of the reasons we wanted this HB 1079 approved, so that we would have citizens' input into the future routes. And so at this point, everything's kind of a guess at what it might be, but there are no final routes determined on I-27 other than what is 87 today. Those frontage roads, et cetera, are not determined. That will be with citizens' input as well as mayors, councilmen, commissioners, et cetera. So he can do it, but just to be sure, we don't have
And I
it
think
defined.
Just what you said, we'll let John put the big old disclaimer
Yeah.
on it, but I had a lot of calls and concerns from people that have business on
Correct.
2105. And we agree with it. It's not common sense to have to go out and buy out that many businesses, so that
Yep.
stretch is probably going to be north of there. But anyway,
Yes.
I'd just like to see something on that.
Yeah. And the same thing on I-14, there's, a lot of it is defined, but whether they choose to do 190 as well as the route that we prefer, or do both is not defined yet, just to be sure. Okay, with that, I will ask for an adjournment
Move we adjourn.
and a second, and let's take a vote on that. See if there's any controversy.
No, we have not had a nay today, so nay.
I'm going to be the only nay.
Okay, so now it's 3-2, we're
I don't wanna go
closed.
back
Oh,
to
no,
work. I don't
we're
wanna go back to
adjourned.
work.
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
The regulars at the City of San Angelo's 2 senior centers have remained active well into their 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond.